Welcome, everyone. Happy Whitman Day. I hope that that things are well wherever you are in the country or around the world. And thank you so much for well, not just for joining us today, but thank you for all the ways in which you support Whitman and the university here in Syracuse. So our agenda for this morning is to I'll bring you up to speed a little bit on how Whitman has navigated the pandemic. Then I'd like to talk a little bit about the progress we've made strategically during the pandemic. We haven't let it slow us down too much. And then I want to take a few minutes to look ahead to the next academic year. And then we'll have time, hopefully, for questions and well, also hopefully for answers. And when we get there, you'll find everyone's mics are muted, so we're going to ask you to use the Q&A function to type in your questions, and then I'll do my best to answer them as we go through. So with that in mind. Let me begin by acknowledging with respect the Onondaga Nation, the firekeepers of the Haudenosaunee, the indigenous people on whose ancestral lands Syracuse University now stands. So here's our benefactor and founder, Marty Whitman. I think on this Whitman Day in particular, he would be even more proud of the school. He's always been very proud of Whitman and our graduates, all the great research and education that our faculty offer. But I think after a year like we've just had, I think he would be tremendously proud of the creativity and resilience and frankly just the grit that our community has shown in getting through the pandemic and managing to keep our core activities, our core mission of education and research moving forward on such a high trajectory as we've done. And I'm also very grateful to everyone in our school, our students who have the majority have done everything that we've asked of them in a very difficult environment, from pivoting to online learning last spring and having to go home early, to coming back to campus and having to deal with a very modified campus environment. And they've put up with hybrid schedules for attending class, masking and social distancing and isolation and testing. I'm just so proud of our students and what they've done. I'm equally, if not more, proud of our faculty and staff. Our faculty, in particular, to adjust to hybrid teaching has been much more difficult than I think anyone would have predicted when we first decided that this was the right way to go for the school and for the university. It turns out to be very hard to teach in a mask and extremely hard to manage students that are in class and students that are online at the same time. But our faculty have stepped up and done that and adjusted their courses, either to be hybrid or in some cases to be fully online. So a lot of unanticipated energy and creativity and innovation went into making all of that happen, and they've done it while of course balancing what was going on at home with child care, unanticipated childcare, unanticipated elder care, everything you name it, all the way across the board. And our staff as well. Our staff, they pivoted to remote work initially, and then switched to a hybrid approach to supporting students and faculty and each other. And they too have done a tremendous job of keeping everything going here at school, while managing the challenges that the pandemic has presented at home and in their personal lives. And anyways, I'm just so grateful to everyone, our students, our faculty and staff, for what they've done, and I'm sure Marty would be proud of them all. The other group that I'm particularly grateful to is our alumni, all of the alumni that are joining us here today. Our alumni have stepped up in an enormous variety of ways, whether it's helping us and participating in as speakers virtually in classes, through the virtual mentoring that we were offering to students as they tried to figure out how to navigate the pandemic, or helping us, for example, to find internships and placement in this very difficult environment. Our alumni have really stepped up for us, and again, we're always grateful. But and I'm not sure I have good enough words. But again, I'd like to say thank you to all of our alumni. We can't say it well enough or often enough, but thank you. So with that, let me talk a little bit about what's been going on here at the university. So the good news is spring is returning here on the Hill. You can see the picture on the left there of the tulips was taken just last week, and really the whole campus is in delightful bloom. I think spring came a couple of weeks earlier here this year, and if there was any year that would be good to have an early spring, I think this is it. So I think we can all be grateful for that as well. The other thing that we're grateful for is that COVID is more or less in retreat for the moment here at SU. So this just occurred to me, this looks a little bit like a roller coaster, and that's kind of what the year has been like. It's been a little bit of up and down all the way through. What this is the a 14-day moving average of the daily case count. So the way to read this over here on the right is our current daily case count is down to about 10 cases per day, which compared to where we were just a month ago is terrific, because we had risen to 25. And then you can see that our biggest challenge occurred in the fall, when really after Halloween, the cases surged here on campus, and within a couple of weeks, we had to send the students home a little earlier than we had planned in mid-November. But you can see it looks like the roller coaster ride may be ending here. I hope that's the case. It is kind of a race between the vaccine and our ability to stay vigilant versus the new variants of the virus that are out there, and the natural fatigue that's setting in for everyone. But right now, everything looks pretty good. And one of the things that's really helping us is we're now at a point where, and this is from last week, so this has probably gone up a little bit, but last week the university reported that nearly 2/3 of our students are fully vaccinated. Many of them got their vaccines either at the New York State Fairgrounds or downtown at the On Center. And then at the end of March, the university was able to get, as vaccine eligibility opened up, the Onondaga County started allowing us shipments of vaccine that we could administer on campus through the Barnes Center. So that's really terrific here on campus, getting close to the levels that that folks talk about for herd immunity among the students. And I learned just the other day that our faculty and staff are reporting about a 75% level of vaccination. So all of that is very encouraging, I think, here on the at the U. Just to kind of round out how the year has been in terms of managing the pandemic. Again, our faculty did an amazing job teaching more than between 75 and 80% of our classes in hybrid mode throughout the year. And I like to note that the average at the university was slightly over 50% of classes taught in hybrid mode. So Whitman faculty really stepped up. And again, I couldn't be more proud of them. And also, frankly, our IT staff who really stepped up to support them throughout the year. Our staff generally, again, did hybrid advising and support throughout the year. And we probably have found and will adopt some of the practices that we've developed through the year for the future, so that students can have options to get course advising or career advising on remotely online, which I'm sure they'll like in the months of January and February when we're back to normalcy, hopefully in the future. We were able to once again have job placement for the undergraduate class above 90%. The difference is it took an enormous all hands on deck effort of our career staff, of course, really kind of leading the charge. But they had all kinds of support from our alumni relations, our corporate relations, our development staff. Really, our staff really got behind making sure that our students found the kinds of jobs that they were hoping for when they before the pandemic arrived and changed everybody's plans. The big difference is it took longer this year. Usually we get to 90% in September. I believe it took us until December to get there this past year. Looking ahead, we're still operating kind of under health protocols, and so we have to modify our normal activities. So the universities worked closely with the county and the state to figure out how convocation and commencement could best work. And the end result of this is Whitman convocation is going to be virtual. In fact, earlier this week I filmed my convocation remarks, which would normally be delivered in the dome with all the students and their families and loved ones there. And then this afternoon, I'm going to spend 3 hours over at the dome getting pictures with the graduates, and I guess a appropriately socially distanced way to do that. But so we've adjusted to that, and then SU is going to do the commencement in person, but it looks like they'll probably have to do it in 2 or 3 chunks, because the state is only allowing us to have just slightly under 5,000 people in the dome for each commencement. So with students and each student having a couple being allowed to bring 2 guests, the university, and they haven't announced it yet, is they've asked students to tell them whether or not they plan to be at commencement, and then they're going to make a decision about whether we're going to have 2 ceremonies or 3 ceremonies, for example. So all of that is why I have the cat in the hat over here, just to I guess empathize, kind of trying to figure out how to keep our balance and deal with all the chaos that we've encountered throughout the year, and do it. And frankly, I guess again, I've got to say, in a way which I hope will make all of our alumni proud. Certainly, I feel like all of our faculty and staff should feel proud of how the school and how our community has managed and navigated its way through this very challenging time, with again with grit, but also with, I think, a lot of grace and creativity. So that kind of, I hope, gives you at least a good overview of how the year's gone. And so now what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about progress that we've made with respect to the school's other priorities and strategic plan. Our main priority for the year, obviously, was to keep everyone safe while doing the best that we could under those conditions, the conditions that safety called for, doing our very best to provide a great educational experience and keep our key activities, research and outreach going, while keeping everyone safe. And so, but we were able to make other progress during the year as well. In fact, you can see, and this picture kind of emphasizes it. So the university was able to make some great progress. This is the new dome that's now up over the stadium. And I guess looking at it, I didn't realize I had a roller coaster theme this morning, but this looks a little bit like the university has installed a roller coaster around the top of the stadium. But I assure you that's not the case. That's the new support for the new dome. So some highlights of what's gone on during the year. We continued. We welcomed 3 terrific new faculty to the school, 2 in marketing, 1 in entrepreneurship, with expertise in areas that we are kind of have identified as the key ones that we want to build on for the strategy of the school around business analytics and around business innovation and entrepreneurship. So and they've all seemed to have gotten off to a really strong start. We also admitted, so we have a couple, one very new dual degree and another recent new dual degree for our Maxwell, our new Maxwell Whitman dual degree, which is focused on international business, international relations. We admitted the inaugural group of undergrads into that program last year. And then we also have our other most recent dual degree with arts and sciences, which is mostly focused on life sciences and math at this point. We've got our first dual degree graduate of that program is gonna walk in commencement, which, well, could be May 22nd or May 23rd, depending on what happens with commencement. So that's all great progress. We launched our new major in business analytics in the fall, and so we've got the first students who've signed up to be a part of that. Very excited about that going forward. I believe that this will become a very popular co-major at the school that students will pair with kind of more traditional functional majors in areas like finance and accounting and marketing and supply chain. So very excited about the new business analytics major, and many thanks to the faculty that really did the work and developed that major, the proposal for that major a couple of years ago. Another important accomplishment for the school this year, to somewhat it's expected that we would be reaccredited. Syracuse is actually one of the first schools that AACSB which is the accrediting body for business schools. I think we were in the first 20 or so schools that were accredited by ACSB back in 1920, and so we were, I guess, to some extent, expected that we would be renewed, but it was also a lot of work. And well, I'm very grateful to the faculty and the staff that did all the work during the last 5 years to make sure that we would be reaccredited again this cycle. Some other, I think, really good headlines, I guess, with regards to progress in the past year. One is we started a conversation in the fall. I've thought about this crisis really as having 3 stages so far, and hopefully a 4th coming. The first stage was firefighting, and that's when we had to figure out how to go to remote teaching and remote and remote support for our staff. And then the second stage of the crisis was really a full-scale mobilization to figure how do we come back to campus and under the conditions of trying to keep everyone safe, provide the best possible environment for educational programs and for our research programs to continue. But then once we kind of got back to campus and realized we were going to be able to stay here in a fairly stable environment, we began a conversation about, all right, what do we think is going to be important and have legs coming out of COVID that we need to start working on to prepare our students for? And while there's still a lot of work to do on this front, I'm very proud of our staff who have arranged for additional new soft skills and technology workshops that we think address some of the things that are going to continue after COVID continues its retreat. So, for example, we expect remote interviewing to continue. So helping students with their remote interviewing and video presentation and persuasive skills is really important. And so we started adding workshops along those lines, as well as other new certifications and technical skills workshops that we think are important for the students going forward. And then finally, another big initiative for the school this year was to implement required diversity and inclusion workshops for all of our faculty, staff, and students. And so we worked with a partner, Diversity EDU, to develop a set of online modules that all of our faculty, staff, and students could take. And I'm pleased to say, we launched that, I think, in January. By a couple of weeks ago, I think we've got our regular faculty have 100% of them have completed the first 2 modules in the sequence, and almost all of them, a little over 95%, have completed all 3, which is terrific. Our staff numbers are fairly similar. And we rolled it out to students a little later in the semester, and they're still working on it. But the numbers look pretty good so far. And the other thing that's happened is that this has ended up being a pilot for the rest of the university. So the other schools and colleges at Syracuse have started to implement diversity EDU training with a set of modules that are very similar to the ones that we developed here at the Whitman School. So another example of Whitman kind of leading the way here at the U. So so that gives you some idea of kind of the progress we've been making. Now, this is an opportunity to talk a little bit about looking ahead to next year. There are already some very good signs, in addition to COVID retreating on campus. One is that our undergraduate applications have really surged this year. So as you can see from this chart on the left in the orange, are Whitman's undergraduate applications. You can see we've gone from just under 5,000 a year ago to about 6,700 or 6,600 this year. So that's very exciting for us. We should be able to bring in a really high quality class of students and group of students this year. And you can see the rest of the university is up, but not quite as much as Whitman, which I hope has some tie to the all the great innovations that our faculty and staff have been doing, as well as the tremendous effort that our faculty and staff have made to keep everything going so well throughout the pandemic. Another positive, faculty hiring is going well. You can see these pictures didn't blow up that I was able to pull off the web didn't blow up as well as I would like them to. But so we've hired 2 new faculty so far. One in accounting, who has some expertise in analytics. That's Willie on the left there. And then Ariel Newman is a new faculty member in our EEE department, with a focus on really kind of on social entrepreneurship is the way I would describe it. And we've still got a few searches going, trying to get 3 more offers out in the next week or so. So faculty hiring for the year seems to be going very well, and so that's something very exciting to look forward to as we move into next fall. Other things, just in terms of priorities for the coming academic year, some of the things that we're going to be working on. One of the key recommendations from our AACSB accreditation review was that we really take our what's called assurance of learning processes to the next level. And essentially what that means is AACSB wants schools to make sure that the learning objectives in all of their programs are aligned with the school's overall mission, very aligned very well with the school's overall mission. And then within each program, our courses, our curriculum, and student learning is students are achieving and learning things that are all very much in line with the learning objectives for each program. And since our vision is to be a school that produces really future-ready talent out there, we want to make sure that our students are indeed future-proof as they graduate. So one of the things we're going to be working before we start working on curriculum and courses and specific ways of assessing learning objectives, we first got to make sure that all the learning objectives for our individual majors and our degrees are aligned with that mission and that vision of producing graduates who are prepared and ready for this ever-changing world that they're gonna graduate into. So that's probably priority number 1 for next year. A second priority, we want to continue to build on the inclusive skill training that we've done. We think in particular, based on the university's recent campus climate survey, we think that really focusing on classroom and interpersonal skill training is going to be really important. So I think we have to identify what the best next steps are in terms of building on the inclusive skill training that we've done already. Other priorities. One of the things we're hoping to be able to return to experiential learning in New York City and elsewhere. but we also want to continue to expand it, and I've used the term level up our experiential learning in New York City and elsewhere. And we've been piloting Study Away in New York, for example, for the last 2 years, which has been really challenging in the pandemic. We're hoping that as things loosen up and we're able to have a greater, more consistent presence and more regular activity and travel to New York City and other places, that we're really able to take that program and the other professional development opportunities and experiential learning opportunities that we're doing in New York City and elsewhere, take those things to the next level. A fourth priority for next year is to, I mentioned earlier that we've got our first graduate of our dual with arts and sciences, and just taken in the first class with our Maxwell dual. I think we want to continue to strategically build out that portfolio of dual, joint, and 3+2 or 3+1 kinds of degrees that enable students to really pursue the kinds of interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, cross-disciplinary kinds of career paths that they're most interested in. Then moving to bullet point number 5 there. We've been working on Goodman Impress and thinking about what kind of the next evolution of Goodman Impress is gonna look like. So we want to finalize those plans and start to really execute on them next year. And this will involve not just upgrading our with appropriate soft skills and technical skills certifications, but also really kind of thinking through how do we create personalized professional development paths through Impress, and make Impress even more relevant to students as they progress from freshman year through senior year as they go out. So that'll be a very important set of innovations for us next year. And then we'll continue to identify and add additional post-COVID educational innovations. And so some of this may take the form of new co-curricular opportunities in places like Impress. But I think we've also, for example, already started a conversation with the teaching committee about how do we integrate some of what we've learned teaching some fully online courses and hybrid courses. How do we start to integrate that more with our regular residential degree program offerings in ways that enhance the residential experience for not just for Whitman majors and minors, but for students all the way across campus. So I think that's an important area for us to work on as we come out of the pandemic and try to leverage some of all the good effort and learning that's gone on. And then the 7th I have up there. One of the things we want to continue to do on the development side is really continue to seek lead gifts to help the school establish what I call spires of excellence in particular areas. For example, if as I mentioned earlier, we want the school to really focus on and build on its strengths in places like business analytics and innovation and entrepreneurial thinking. The school would benefit tremendously by having centers or institutes that are focused on those areas, that support research in those areas, that support education in those areas, and that report things out of the classroom, professional development, maybe new ventures, things like that outside of the classroom. So lots of work to do there, but hopefully some of those will start to come to fruition as we move through next year and really move through the last few years of the university's current $1.5 billion campaign. And then Turning to some of the other things we're going to be working on, we've got the Whitman Advisory Council worked last year very closely with some of our faculty and staff to help us develop a new brand positioning and set of strategic pillars that's aligned with the university's new brand positioning and strategic pillars. And so we're going to be, actually, these things we're running focus groups to try to test how best to talk about how well the new brand positioning that we've come up with is going to work, and how it is that we should exactly be talking about it. And so those the findings for that research should actually be coming in May, maybe in June, as we move into the summer. And so we'll start to roll out what that means in multiple different ways around the school. One of the most significant being a refresh of the school's website, which is long overdue, and but should help us in multiple ways. Everything from kind of increasing our visibility and our reputation to helping us to enhance some of our important revenue generating programs like our residential master's programs and so on. But so this gives you just a quick summary of the strategic pillars that the group identified. Kind of a core one being that we offer this future-proofed multidisciplinary education, which goes back to some of the things I've been talking about, how we're thinking about the learning objectives in our different programs and thinking about adding new dual and joint programs across the school, continuing to kind of intentionally invest in and make even better our student-centric community that we've got here on campus and the collaborative community that we have in Whitman. And then of course, two of the things that really help to differentiate us. One is how strongly we believe in connecting with practice, connecting theory with practice, making sure our students are experiencing business. This is something that goes right back to the very beginning of Whitman. Back in 1919, 1920, they were requiring students to have an internship before graduating from Whitman. So it's a long tradition here, and one we want to continue to build on. And then finally, the most orange thing up there, of course, is our powerful alumni and corporate network. And that's something, of course, we benefit from tremendously, and we want to continue to give back to and continue to find ways to grow. And then finally, this is my last slide before opening things up to Q&A, which is good because I'm right on the promised 40 minutes here. Looking ahead to what we hope the fall will look like, the university has announced that they're planning for a full return to being on campus, fully on campus, with a full set of in-person classes and activities. A very important part of that is they've announced that vaccinations will be required for all faculty, students, and staff. And medical and religious exemptions are going to be considered, just as they would for, say, hepatitis shots or things like that. So that's the hope. That's what we're aiming for. I think the caveat around it, I guess we've always had to talk with caveats for the last year or so. It's all subject to public health conditions. The hope is that the county, the CDC, the county, the state will be the conditions will be such that the protocols will allow for us to have students back in class, fully occupying classrooms, and faculty their teaching, hopefully not having to speak through a mask, but that may or may not happen. We'll see how that works out. The one thing I can tell you is that the university feels very confident that very, very few classes will have to be taught in hybrid mode next year. And the one area where we may have to do a little bit is to serve some of our international students who may have challenges getting here because of the current visa situation in different parts of the world. But overall, I think it's very hopeful, very optimistic that we will be back on campus, all of us together, and be able to function in a much more, and I'm going to put it in quotes, air quotes here, normal kind of way with everything that we do in the fall, whether we're talking about classes or hosting research presentations here on campus. So that's my presentation. And again, I can't thank our faculty, staff, and students enough for all they've done to navigate this year, and thank all of our alumni for all they've done to support us. But again, thank you. So with that, let me turn to the Q&A, and let me see what we have that's been proposed here. So I've got, there's Dawn. Hey, Dawn. So Dawn asks, have we considered requiring? Yes, yeah. So we did require. We have done that, and that will be the that will be the context for everyone to be on campus in the fall, is that they'll either have to be vaccinated or have an exemption, and which should work fine, as long as what the public health folks are saying is that as long as we're north of well north of like 80% of the population on campus vaccinated, having folks with medical exemptions should be okay. For example, because we should be at a level that promotes herd immunity here. Okay, so the second question is what is 3+N? So that's a 3+1 or a 3+2 kind of a degree. So for example, probably our most successful 3+2 right now is with the engineering school. So what that requires is students spend their first 3 years at engineering, satisfying their engineering requirements, and then they join the Whitman School for their MBA for 2 years after that. And so we're gonna, and one of the reasons they do that instead of having a dual undergraduate degree is engineering has such a demanding set of requirements due to their accrediting body that makes it very difficult for them to consider doing a dual degree in a 4-year kind of a period. But we're going to be looking into doing more of these, not just 3+2, which is with the MBA and with other parts of campus than the engineering school, but 3+1s where students are doing an undergraduate degree in one part of the university, then coming here to do one of our 1-year master's degrees. So that could be, for example, our 1-year master's degree in business analytics, or master's degree in finance, or master's degree in supply chain management, or marketing, for example. So the next question: what is the future of the Defense Comptroller program? Should be great. We've actually got a very strong class already signed up for the fall. So yeah, I anticipate that. So for those of you who don't know, the Defense Comptrollership program is one that the university has run with the Department of Defense since the 1950s, and in most recent years, students from the Department of Defense are getting an MBA and an MPA from Maxwell at the same time. And yeah, that program continues to do well. The students are extraordinarily impressive people and go on to great leadership roles. And so, I think the future for the Defense Comptrollership is very bright at the Whitman School. So thank you for that question. Let's see, the next one, Greg. So will the finance department consider becoming an affiliated university with the CFA Institute? Yeah, I don't know if any of the finance department faculty or the department chair. Be a great question for the department chair Ravi Shukla or Tom Barkley, who oversees the masters in finance. Um, I don't know that that they have plans to do that in the near future, but I don't know. Alex, is your microphone active? Maybe I can ask Alex McKelvey, who's our associate dean, to see if he has an answer to that particular question.
Hi there. I don't
Hey,
have a
Alex.
great answer to that question. I know we've done a number of things with that. We've encouraged our students to pursue CFA designations. We've offered incentives to the students. But that would be a good conversation for me to have with Ravi and the finance department to really understand what does it mean to be affiliated. Certainly, we see the value in it, but we'll look at what that really means.
Okay, great. Thank you, Alex. Let's see. So the next question that's here is: are there future degree programs planned with the iSchool? I think there are some terrific opportunities for us to do more with even more with the iSchool. We do already have a very high in demand dual degree at the undergraduate level. And then at the graduate level, our masters of science in business analytics, we've already got a number of shared courses in there. So in some ways, we've got a very nice set of courses already degree programs already set up in that vein. But let me, I'll call Alex back again. Didn't realize he had two questions in a row here. Alex, any additional thoughts you might want to add on perhaps other things we might be doing with the iSchool soon?
Sure, we have a number of ongoing conversations with them. The iSchool is launching 2 new undergraduate majors, and that's a big expansion from them. They've historically only been one. Whitman courses are part of that, and in the Master of Science in Applied Data Science. So it's a kind of a sister program to the business analytics program. We also share some courses. So we have ongoing conversations with the iSchool, especially as we all recognize that the importance of data and information management and presentation are fundamental across a number of fields. So we'll continue to have those conversations, but right now we have a couple of things that are working pretty well at the undergraduate and at the graduate level.
Great. Thanks, Alex. And I guess I would just add to that, there's always also the possibility of doing some kind of degree around technology management, which might involve Whitman, the iSchool, and maybe ECS as well, the Engineering Computer Science School. So those would all be, I think, I think good opportunities, good options, because I think they speak to areas that our students are more and more interested in, with the more and more industries and different verticals are kind of and different technologies are converging. The more interest our students have in pursuing degrees that don't fall neatly into the bucket of one particular school or another, but present opportunities for the schools and colleges to team up. And that's one of the big advantages that Syracuse University has, that we want to continue to try to leverage as we move forward into the future. So I guess that's maybe that's it. I don't see any other questions in the Q&A right now. So I guess we'll wrap this up. Once again, I want to thank our alumni for all they do to support the school, and just for those of you who may be thinking of getting involved and maybe have not found the right opportunity yet. I would encourage you to get in touch with our alumni relations lead, Allison Kessler. Allison may have been the one you received an invite from to come to today's talk, but we have very high aspirations for what we want to do and where we want the school to go, and for the school to stay on the trajectory that it's on. We can't do it all on our own, and so every it doesn't matter how small it is, but there are many different ways that alumni can help us. You can volunteer to be a speaker in a class. You could tell Allison that you're willing to speak with a student and perhaps participate in our mentorship program. Certainly, if you or your organization has internship or full-time job placement opportunities, we're always looking for those. And for those who want to be even more involved, we're always looking for folks to join the school's various advisory boards, and other and there are other opportunities around campus, and of course, it's time and talent are always welcome. We can always benefit from treasure as well, that we can use to direct toward supporting our students, and to creating more of the kinds of innovations that we think are important for our students as we try to prepare them to graduate into this ever-changing world out there. And everything counts. $1 into the Dean's Fund. If we get enough of those $1, they always, well, and they help with. I should add, they help with the university's rankings as well. So the rate of participation by alumni is an important part, for example, of the university's overall U.S. news ranking. So even $1 is important, but of course. We welcome conversations about potentially larger gifts if you are interested and would be willing to help us to invest in our students, and to continue to invest in the faculty of the school, who ultimately are the driving force and really the heart of the university, because it's really their intellectual capital that drives our education programs and keeps them relevant and keeps them at the cutting edge. So again, if you are interested in getting more engaged, more involved, please get in touch with Allison Kessler, and I'm sure she'll look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again for joining us. I wish you all a wonderful weekend coming up. Take care out there, and go Orange.